go through the agenda for this morning. So we're on roughly a 2-hour timeline. My goal is to finish up on or before noon Eastern time. And we're going to go over a number of questions that we've got here. So what we're focusing on is what is certification and why. I won't be dwelling on those two because of the time constraints. I'm going to focus on the following two questions. How does one get certified and how do you stay certified? And then I'm going to finish out the webinar by just reviewing, really summarizing the Systems Engineering Handbook 4th edition. That is the knowledge base for the certification. And then I want to tell you about the Digital Systems Engineering Process Model, which is available to all members of INCOSE within the INCOSE website. So I will actually show you what that looks like. We'll go into incose.org together, and you can manipulate the process model for your own use. So that's what we'll be focusing on. All right, so let's start with the first question. What is it? I just want to make sure everybody does understand what is certification. And then we'll also talk about what benefits does it hold. So here is the formal description from INCOSE. It is, the certification is a formal recognition. It recognizes your progress in your career, and the mechanism that it will do that is by having 3 levels of certification, which we'll describe in a minute. The goal here, though, is that it's a formal recognition that you can then show to others and to your peers and to your workplace, and it proves or recognizes that you have developed a certain level of knowledge and practice or experience. So that's it in a nutshell. It's based on, the idea of certification is based on your knowledge of ISO 15288, that is the standard, and your level of experience. And as I mentioned, the way it tracks the progress through your career is through 3 levels of certification. And they're given by the acronyms below. There's associate, certified, and expert. What I'll do now is I'll just go through each of these 3 again quickly. I'm not going to spend a ton of time because I want to get into the process. So let's start with the Associate Systems Engineering Professional. It recognizes systems engineering practitioners who have demonstrated a minimum level of knowledge of systems engineering, but do not have extensive experience in the field. Basically, the main requirement for this level is to pass a knowledge exam. You do not need any experience to achieve an Associate Systems Engineering Professional certification. You could consider that to be an entry-level certification piece or a process. The Certified Systems Engineering Professional recognition is those who demonstrate the knowledge, usually through the knowledge exam, but also have a minimum of 5 years experience in the field. And this would be considered a mid-level systems engineering professional. Again, I'll go through the details in a minute. The highest level of certification that INCOSE offers is the expert systems engineering professional. This is a very senior level of certification. Not only do you need or should have demonstrated a level of knowledge, but you'll also need a minimum of 20 years experience in order to apply for the CEP. So clearly this is a senior level, one in which one of the primary functions of you as a professional is mentoring younger members of the community. So for those three, there are some minimum requirements to achieve the certification. And so I brought this or pulled this right out of the INCOSE website to give you an idea of the comparison of the three levels. Again, the ACEP is simply recognizing systems engineering knowledge. And they do that largely through an exam or, and I'll explain this later, academic equivalency. The CCEP is one in which you need to demonstrate your systems engineering knowledge through the exam or academic equivalency, and you need to have 5 years minimum experience. In order to quote unquote prove your experience, you'll need to include 3 references. These would be references of people who know your experience and can basically vouch that you have the prerequisite levels of experience. And then ECEP, as you can see, is quite extensive in that you must have a minimum of 20 years. There are some exceptions where the minimum rises to 25 years. And it's largely based on a set of references as well as an interview with other ECEPs appointed by INCOSE. So these are the 3 levels. Now, you do not need to progress through the levels. You can apply for any of these 3 levels at any time. So you do not need to first become an ACEP, then become a CCEP, then become an ECEP. In fact, you can apply and receive certification in one level and remain there for the remainder of your career if that's what you desire. Now, I will tell you again up front, because this is typically a question that comes to fore, and that is, how much is this going to cost? And so for 2023, you will need to pay an application fee for the various levels that you're applying for. If you're going to take the exam as part of the ACEP or CCEP, you'll need to pay an examination fee. And then to remain certified, you'll need to pay a renewal fee. I will go through the renewal process, so you'll have a fantastic understanding, full understanding of how to do that by the end of today. All right. There is a hybrid, and that is a transition process. If you are currently an ACEP, then you can apply to transition to the CCEP. The cost is $200. However, there's no knowledge exam required because you have already passed the knowledge exam. So that process is a little streamlined from simply becoming a CCEP initially. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. All right, let me pause here. Those are the 3 levels of certification. Any questions on the 3 levels? Yes, Janavi, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yes. I just completed my master's, and I've already tried to complete the certification ASEP, but unfortunately I did not pass the exam. So,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
so should I try to apply again and pay the exam fee again? Like, will it be total of $180 and $80 again?
So there are some options that you have. You
Mm-hmm.
can retake the exam within a certain period of time where
Mm-hmm.
you'll only need to pay the examination fee.
Okay.
So that is an option that you have. Basically, you have a year from your application to
Mm-hmm.
pass the exam. So the only thing you'll need to pay for, again, will be the exam fee. All right, you will not need to go through the official application process again, starting from scratch.
All right.
So, yep, so I
That's
hope
a
that helps.
that's actually
Yes.
a good question. Did you this is Paul Martin, by the way. There is an aspect that the examination can be done prior to the application. Did you do the application?
Yes, I did the application.
So you already gave them the $180, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah, but Steve's right. You don't have to repay that. You
Mm-hmm.
do need to pass the exam, but they also allow you to pass the exam first, and then you can apply. But that's not for you. But for the others, they should be aware they can take the exam without starting an application. Did you
Right.
right,
But,
Steve?
yep, thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
That's a good
Just to
clarification.
clarify. Yeah.
Mhm,
Thank you.
yes. So I'm glad you raised that question, because that absolutely true. And regardless of ACEP or CCEP, either one, you have up to a year to retake the exam, and where you will only pay for the exam fee again. Great. Are there any other questions on the different levels? One of the materials that you will receive after this morning in the email is a set of 20 sample questions with answers. So if you haven't taken the exam and you're not quite sure what to expect, we do have a set of exam questions for you. And I'm going to get into a little more detail on the exam itself as well. So we'll talk about that. All right, if there are no other questions, I wanted to then go through the second of the introduction material, and that is why. Why do we get certified? What does it mean? What does it, Mary, I'm sorry, I just saw your comment, and the answer is yes. There are preparation courses, which I am going to talk about, and in fact, Paul, who just spoke, is also going to give us some additional information on that as well. So absolutely, yes. All right. So why get certified? You know, is this going to mean that the big raise is coming and you're going to get rich? Probably not. Probably not. You know, is it going to lead to fame and fortune? Well, it might lead to a little bit of fame. Probably not a whole lot of fortune. So why do we do it? And by the way, I should have mentioned that there are thousands of people across the globe that are now certified, well, through the INCOSE certification program. So this is not something that only a handful of practitioners that have gone through. In fact, it is something that a great deal of members have done. In the Chesapeake chapter, we have 284 members, and more than half have been certified. So it's a fairly popular, and in certain fields, it is extremely important. In others, honestly, it's not. And I'll actually talk about that in a couple of minutes. But understand that certification is first and foremost recognition among your peers. That's the number one importance of getting certified. Secondly, it demonstrates to others, not only your peers, but also your company, your customers, and other stakeholders involved in engineering, that you have a minimum level of knowledge and experience in this field. It is a way to quote unquote prove that you have knowledge and experience in the systems engineering domain. So that's important. I've included a couple of other interesting tidbits, pieces of information about what certification does, either in general or with you personally. So I want to also just bring out that the certification process is not just recognition for others, but also it helps you to learn more about the systems engineering field, because you are tested in a knowledge base. It means you're going to learn. So certification also helps you. By the way, Mary, just real quickly, I will talk about the academic equivalency. So stay tuned on that. I mentioned the idea that honestly, some fields value certification more than others. Systems engineering really grew up in the aerospace and defense industries, and especially with government contracts and government systems engineering, certification is valued. Same with Homeland Security. There are other domains that have recognized certification, and I list those, and then still others that are growing in their knowledge and understanding of systems engineering. And those you may not find quite a high level of valuing certification, but the recognition that systems engineering is important is growing in those industries as well. So in the future, there are a lot of domains that value systems engineering, and then when they understand the concept of recognition and the fact that certification means you have proved your set of knowledge and experience level, it will grow. All right. Now, with that, there are a number of companies that have signed certification agreements with INCOSE. Here is a list. This is actually a subset. It's not the full list, but there are a number of companies that value in tangible ways certification levels. And you can see those companies. Same with universities. There are a number of universities, which I'll get to a little later on this morning, that value systems engineering and the certification process. So I want to make sure that you understand that in many industries, and the number is growing, recognition is valued. I also want to just ensure that that you all understand the biggest or the largest value is what you gain, not the letters after your name. By the way, in case you're wondering, yes, you can put the systems engineering professional level, the letters after your name in your byline on your business cards. All right. So again, in some industries that's valued, some industries not so much, but you're able to do that. All right. So it's important to understand. Also, I just want to mention INCOSE, the organization, as well as their handbook that they have published, is based on the International Standard 15288. This is important because if you have received certification from INCOSE, it is the equivalent of being certified in the systems and software engineering processes, i.e. 15288. And that's something you can put on your resume. Again, the fact that you will now be extremely knowledgeable about 15288 is even more important, again, than the letters that you put behind your name. So that's a short description of why we do it. It is the recognition and the knowledge that you gain. So again, I want to pause now. Are there any questions on the concept of certification and what it means? So
Hey, Steve, this is George Grant. I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I'm a CCEP, but I'm a government employee. I have the engineering level 3, which it used to be called systems engineering level 3. How does that play into when I'm ready to apply for the ESEP?
So in terms of other engineering certification levels, that would be part of your experience base. Part of it would be another stepping stone. You, just so everyone's aware, you do not need any additional certification or licenses or any other type in order to apply and successfully achieve ESEP. However, George just, okay, I'm sorry, George, in your case, it helps because it is something that you have demonstrated a certain level of knowledge and experience that they're looking for, that the INCOSE organizers are looking for when they are looking at ESEP applications. So my answer to you is it helps. It absolutely helps. It's not required, but it does help in those terms. Also, the more information that you can give in your application about what does that mean in your particular industry, i.e. in your case, government work, would also, excuse me, would also help as well.
Yes, the engineering level 3, to my knowledge, when I was before I took the CCEP, I could have, I think it was like an equivalent to the CCEP, if that makes sense. And I think I could have not have it taken the CCEP, but I wanted to understand INCOSE's process as well.
Right. Yeah, there is no formal equivalency to ESEP. At least there's no formal one. If there is anything informal, I am not aware of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Steve. Equivalent to CCEP.
Right. Yes. Your engineering level 3 is roughly equivalent to CCEP. Yes. You can. So I just wanted for everyone. There are exceptions. As I mentioned, I'll talk specifically about academic equivalency. There are other exceptions, which I'm not going to get into this morning, again, because of time. And I'll just give one example. If you are associated with the Defense Acquisition University, or you have a degree from DAU, there is a streamlined version for certification at the CCEP level, actually, and the ACEP level. There are some other areas where if you're associated with or have certain levels, then you can get a streamlined version. Now, to my knowledge, and Paul, let me know if I'm wrong here. To my knowledge, there is no other credential that will automatically get you certification without going through the process. So there are some streamline. Is that right, Paul?
Yes, that's right. I think the only thing they have is, and you'll probably get into this, there's certain colleges that in universities where if you take certain either classes or programs within those colleges, you're exempt from the exam, but not the application. So you always have to do the application no matter what. And Steve, you're right. The application, if you put in, it's interesting, the application, and you'll get in, well, maybe you've already done this, but there are criteria for each application. And if you meet that criteria, if you go beyond that criteria, it doesn't add to you being able to get the certification. Does that make sense? Like, for instance, you need like a bachelor's type degree for a CCEP. If you have a master's, that's good, but it doesn't add anything to you getting the CCEP. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. So just keep in mind that you're trying to meet the criteria. Going above the criteria is nice, but it's not necessary. But anyway.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Paul. And
Also,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. The engineering level 3 is DAU, Defense Acquisition University, just so you know.
Thank you. So in that case, there is a streamlined version and for certification, including CCEP. Now, as Paul mentioned, of course, everyone still needs to apply. They're going to get your money no matter what. But you will be able to waive certain requirements for that. Okay. I want to address the handbook edition. Myrna, I see your question. So the 5th edition, I'm not aware that it's been released yet. It is scheduled to be released next month, July, probably sometime during the International Symposium in July. But just for the record, the 4th edition will still be used in the knowledge exam at least through this calendar year. So once the 5th edition is released, there will be forthcoming a revised version of the knowledge exam. But for the remainder of this year, you will and still can use the 4th edition. There will be an overlap period where you can choose, when you take the examination, you can choose which edition of the handbook you would like to be tested on. At some point in 2024, the 4th edition handbook is going to be retired. And then from that point on, and I do not have a date, I only have the year 2024, but I don't have the date. At that point, then all exams will be based on the 5th edition. And I see in the discussion, that's correct. You can already download the ebook and order the paperback. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. All right. The paperback is scheduled to be released in July. And I know that because I pre-ordered a copy of the paperback book because I'm old school. All right. Yes, from Wiley and the INCOSE store. You can go on the INCOSE website, by the way, and they have announcements about the 5th edition and pre-ordering or ordering the ebook.
So the ebook, just to be clear, Steve, because I didn't know it was available, is the ebook available free again for INCOSE members?
That I don't know. David, do you know that?
It should be.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you for asking me, Stephen. This is a very good question because it's one of the issues that I've personally actually lived through over the last couple of weeks, because in theory, the actual discount that will be that's being applied, and by the way, the discount is substantial because it's about 55%. The actual discount is available through a special discount code. So the actual code is given to you by INCOSE. If you go on the INCOSE store, you'll see it announced, and you use that code when you actually buy or you order the copy, whether it be the ebook or the paperback book. Unfortunately, in my case, I have to have both of them. So I have to have the ebook and the paperback because I actually train people. So what happened in my case was that I needed first the ebook and then also the paperback. So I ordered the paperback first because I wasn't sure of the delivery date. And then the ebook I directly downloaded from the John Wiley website. And unfortunately there I didn't get a discount because I'd already pre-ordered the paperback version through the INCOSE store. So whether you'll get it free of charge, whether you'll get a discount or not on both copies, I'm not sure. In my experience, it's not. So you do get a discount, but I believe just on one of the two versions. If it's going to be made available as in the previous editions, for example, edition 4, I'm sure in the end you probably get a free copy if you're an INCOSE member. As I said, right now it's a 55% discount on one of the two versions. At least that's been my experience.
That's perfect. And you downloaded the e-copy? You have it on your?
Yeah, if you want
All
to see it, actually, before the end of the session today, I'll actually show you what it looks like.
No,
There is a
that's good.
slight drawback in the sense that the previous versions, at least the ones that I've downloaded, were all PDFs. And in this particular case, through the John Wiley website, you have to download a specific ebook software, which it's not difficult to do. It's not difficult to do.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And you get a redemption code, which essentially is a code that allows you to access through this software your ebook version of the handbook. That's how it works.
Okay,
So
now I understand. Okay.
So I'm not sure whether it's because I can't see the extension of the file. So I'm not sure whether it's a PDF, whether it's an EPUB, or whatever other version of ebook. All I see is just the file in the software that I open, and I can access the content.
I think that's probably because they're working with Wiley, and Wiley is, of course, trying to sell both ebook as well as the paperback. But the PDF itself would have to be done by INCOSE, and they
I would imagine so.
They'll have a separate link for that once it's available. You're right. And I believe when we get the version 4 PDF, you get an email that says, hit this link, and it has nothing to do with Wiley, I believe. So yeah, that's actually a good point, because you're right. An ebook is separate from a PDF. It has to be done on the computer and all that.
Just for the benefit of everybody as well. It was still in the teething period, so we've got a bit of we've got to be patient. In other words, I was more interested in the ebook rather than the paperback version, and because that's the thing that I need now to prepare my training slides. So the paperback will arrive maybe in 10 days time or whatever it's going to be, but I needed that ebook fairly quickly, and that was the most of the frustration for me. But it's
sounds like you and I are same level here. All right, we'll let Steve continue. Sorry, Steve.
Not at all. Thank you for the discussion. Yes, thank you. I appreciate all the clarification. So, Mary, let me hold off on that. I mean, besides acquiring the 5th edition and doing your own comparison, INCOSE will publish or will provide a description of the differences of the updates. I don't know when though. Okay. All right. And yes, Mary, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Excellent. So I'd like to now transition to my 3rd agenda item, and that is the process of getting certified. I'm going to go through each of the 3 certification levels, focusing a little more heavily on the ACEP and the CCEP, but still addressing the ECEP process. It is a very specific process in order to get your certification. So it's important to understand the steps. Of course, missing a step or leaving something out of the application, it just causes delay. So I want to be very clear. What I've done is I've pulled down the graphic from the INCOSE website, and this is how I'll use the and guide the discussion that we've got. So in all cases, you must be a member of INCOSE, a current member. You cannot let your membership lapse. In fact, when or if you do, then your certification also lapses. So certification is only as good as you remaining a member. And that's important. And then we'll talk about that. So what does it take to be a member? Just FYI, it is an annual membership where you have primarily 3 levels of membership. Again, there are some other exceptions, but these are the primary 3. Individual senior, which is 65 and older, and student. You must be registered as a student in an accredited program. So a significant discount for seniors and students. So assuming that you are a member, then you can apply. So let me now focus specifically on the ACEP. The ACEP application is very straightforward. In fact, this is the form on the right-hand side. It's 1 page. Like I said, this is the form for the application. Remember from before, the only requirement for ACEP is to pass the knowledge exam or receive an academic equivalency. So you fill out the application. You then, and this is straightforward, you then need to pay INCOSE $180. That's the application fee for the ACEP. And once you've done that, although as we've talked about, you don't have to apply to take the exam. You can take the exam before or after you have applied for the certification. And so here is the knowledge exam. So what is it? It is a multiple choice exam. It, excuse me, it has 120 questions, of which 100 are scored. The others are beta questions for future exams. You do not know which is which. So you will take the exam and you will have to answer all 120 questions. It is based on the handbook, which I'll talk about. The exam is 2 hours long, which means you have 1 minute per question. It's closed book, it's closed note, and it is monitored or proctored. Now, you do have 2 modes. You can take the exam online. If you do that, then INCOSE still proctors the exam through a certain software and organization. And so basically you must have a camera, you must have a microphone, you must record your session in which you are taking the exam. And then that recording will be reviewed by the proctoring organization. So it is going to be closed book, closed note. And as you can see, 1 minute per question, you either know the material or you don't. So it's really important to know the material, which is not trivial considering the handbook is quite long. And I'll get into that in a minute. And of course, the cost is $80. So you do have up to 1 year. When you, from your application, you can take the test multiple times. You must pay $80 each time. Now, let me just address the discussion because this is a great time to talk about academic equivalency. So INCOSE will make an agreement, sign an agreement between the organization and a university. Once that agreement is in place, and by the way, only when that agreement is in place, then if a student successfully passes a specifically approved course that uses the handbook, then you may waive, or they will waive, the knowledge exam. I have listed in below the universities, and I also see in the chat, University of Maryland, Baltimore County is in fact one of the universities. For the Chesapeake chapter, University of Maryland Global Campus was also just recently approved, and I mean like a week ago it was approved. So those are two University of Maryland colleges. I guess the next closest university is George Mason University, which also has an agreement. Notice the number of schools is not large. Part of that is because the academic equivalency program is fairly young. Certification has been around for quite a while. The academic equivalency is not, hasn't been around for a while. What it means to actually get to this point is that the university will, in essence, apply to INCOSE. It must be the university. It can't be the student nor the member applying for ACEP or CCEP. So unfortunately, you cannot say to INCOSE, hey, wait a minute, I took a course at this university. It is based on the INCOSE SE handbook. In other words, the handbook is the textbook in which the course is based on, and I am requesting the equivalency. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. The university has to do it. And so if you want, or if you are planning on taking a course, and remember, the course has to be based on the SE handbook. It can't just be any systems engineering course or even an intro course. It's got to be based, and INCOSE will make that final determination. So work with your college program leadership. Once the college applies, then INCOSE will then audit the course. And I don't mean that they'll sit in on one of the offerings of the course. What the university will need to do is provide all the materials for the course. All right. They are based on courses. It's not based on a program, it's based on a course. So if the university does not offer a course based on the SE handbook, then there is no way they can get an academic equivalency ruling.
I can talk a little bit about this, Steve.
Go ahead.
This is Paul again. I did it for UMBC, and you're absolutely right. There are learning objectives that actually later on I can show you where you can see those things. But the learning objectives are the important aspect to what they're looking for, all based on the handbook. And those learning objectives have to be linked to, like you said, either a course or a program. Fortunately for UMBC, we had one course, which is my course actually, but it actually linked all the learning objectives. So just taking that course is sufficient. There are other universities where you may have to take 3 or 4 courses. So again, they link it up, they work with INCOSE to make that work. So
thank you for that clarification, Paul. Yeah, I appreciate it. Fortunately, there are a number of schools that are currently in the process of attempting to get the academic equivalency. So there will be more universities and colleges that'll be added to this list. Right now, there are 14. There were recently 12, by the way. Southern Methodist University and University of Maryland Global Campus were the recent 2 that were added this month, June of 2023. So it takes time, and I appreciate Paul, you saying that it does take a heavy involvement with INCOSE. So it is the university that has to work with INCOSE CE. Unfortunately, you as a student or you as a member cannot do this process. You cannot get a program or a course that would be successful to be the equivalency. So it's important.
Yeah, I should clarify too.
Mhm.
The university actually needs to have, I believe, an ESEP, but maybe a CCEP, but they do need a person that's kind of the point of contact, and they need to be, or some professor or something needs to have an INCOSE certification as well. So there's that kind of link that also needs to be made. So, yeah,
I
it
agree.
does add a little more to the university to make this work.
What I understand as well from talking with some folks in INCOSE, it does help if the university is involved, or at least some of its staff is involved in INCOSE. It's very difficult if a college has no association with INCOSE at all.
Yes.
No one is certified.
Right.
That's going to be an uphill battle for the university to get a course or program into this program.
No, absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just FYI, if you're going to a university that right now just has no connections with INCOSE, that's going to be a challenge. All right. So my recommendation is first explore whether the university is interested in having connections with INCOSE, and that really is the first step for this process. UMBC does, in fact. So obviously, Paul is both a member of the UMBC faculty as well as INCOSE. So
yeah, I have an ESEP. Yeah,
that helps a great deal. Are there any other questions on either academic equivalency or the ACEP before I move on to CCEP?
Just to clarify, I don't know if you already mentioned it, but they can take the exam before becoming a member and before applying. So what's nice about that is you can take the exam as many times as you want. And once you pass, you can go ahead and become a member, and start your application. And that's true for CCEP as well.
Right. Great. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that good clarification. By the way, I should have mentioned this, but I was intrigued with the chat. The application can be done online. Obviously, though, you will need to submit a signed version, but basically the most common form is that you download the PDF form, which, by the way, I'm going to give you all of the applications in PDF form for the 3 different levels. But there are some situations where you can apply online in INCOSE, within the INCOSE website. Okay. All right, if there are no others, let's see. Okay, let me get into CCEP. Just as a way of background, the CCEP level is by far the most common level. Of the thousands that are certified, more than half of all those certified are at the CCEP level. ACEP would be the next most common. It is by far the easiest, and then ECEP is the most difficult. And that's what the numbers will show. Now, the CCEP process is a little more involved than the ACEP. In fact, it's just the ACEP is quite simple, is what I'm trying to say. CCEP is going to take some time, and that's important to understand. So let me go through that. Of course, first of all, you have to be a member of INCOSE, and actually, to clarify what Paul said, you technically can take the exam before you're a member, but you cannot apply before you're a member. So you must be a member. Then we get into the application. Now, Where ACEP had a one-page application, CCEP is significantly larger. And it varies depending on your experience level. So your application could be anywhere from 5 to 10 pages. I'm going to go through some of the significant portions. So here's the application. This is page 1 that I'm showing you on the right-hand side. Pretty straightforward, nothing complicated here. But I do want to go to page 2, because page 2 is now where you need to start providing significant information. And the first portion is going to be your academic background. So you'll list all of your education. I just want to mention that you will be asked to provide transcripts for all degrees that you claim on your application. Very important. Also, I've indicated in the red box, I've talked already about CCEP requiring a minimum of 5 years experience. That assumes that you have a bachelor's degree in a technical field. It must be a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it has to be in a STEM field. If you have a bachelor's degree in a STEM field, then you are required to show 5 years of experience minimum. If you do not have a bachelor's degree in a STEM field, you can still apply for CCEP. However, the experience level increases. So say you have a bachelor's degree in history, that is not a STEM degree, and you would need to show a minimum of 10 years experience. If you do not have a bachelor's degree, then you can still apply for CCEP, but you then must show at least 15 years of experience. And you can see the note, INCOSE is the final authority on determining whether your bachelor's degree is eligible as a STEM degree. All right, and so just wanted to point that out. Most applications are in that first category, but fortunately, INCOSE provides alternative methods. So you'll need to check which level. Then you'll have to get into the experience that you have. Now, experience is very defined in the INCOSE application process. There are 2 aspects. Number 1 is your work experience. All right. Oh, I just saw the chat, FYR. You were allowed to upload photos. Thank you. I didn't know you were allowed to do that. So that's news to me. Good. So in the experience, you have to, of course, provide all of your experience in the systems engineering field. You do not need to include experience outside of systems engineering. It will not qualify. What you'll do is you'll first identify what your experience was, similar to what you would put on a resume. Also, notice that you need to provide 1 or more names of references that can verify your work experience. This is important, and in some cases, INCOSE will contact those references. Once you put in the organization, your position, your role, which is down here at the bottom, you'll calculate the number of months that you have worked in this particular role. And that's up here. It's slightly colored slightly different, calculated months. INCOSE is going to use the number of months for a reason. So you put in your experience for each organization you've been associated with. And then for each experience, you have to do something more. The application continues. For this experience, you must describe the functional area that you were associated with. In the form, you can choose from a drop-down menu, which I've reproduced on the left-hand side of the screen of the slide. And so here are the functional areas that are defined by INCOSE. And in fact, they all do have specific definitions and examples. One of the materials that I'm going to give you is the actual documentation that defines not only the certification program, but also functional areas in systems engineering. And so you'll be able to have that. It's a PDF document. You'll be able to look in those and see the definition, descriptions, and examples of the type of work that fall under these functional areas. And what you'll do is describe it in the application, and very importantly, on the upper right-hand side of each functional area, you will see months worked. Again, INCOSE measures everything in months. So it's important to track your experience and especially the experience within each functional area. All right, it's important. So that's key. And then you can see the list that I have here, which again, in the document you will receive, there are additional informations that are available. Once you've done this for all of your experience, you're then going to summarize this. Now, part of the application is automated, which is nice, unless you print things out and you're going to do everything by paper. But part of this is automated. So whether you do it manually or whether your version of Adobe Acrobat can handle automation, or whether you do it online, et cetera, regardless, what you're going to need to do is total up the number of months in each systems engineering area. So here are the functional areas that we just listed. You will have your position, that's the P1 through P7 here, can be within the same organization or different organizations, but you will address each by position. You can have more than 7 positions. That's not a limit. And very simply, you will fill out this matrix. Or if you're working an automated version, it'll fill it out for you because you put in months worked and you put in positions in your experience. All right. David, on the new portal, certificate, the experience is much more detailed. Yes, absolutely. And in fact, the PDF document that I'm going to give you, actually, let me just pull that up and put it into your view here. So INCOSE has provided a document called the INCOSE CEP Certification Definition and Requirements document. And it goes through all of the different areas. It'll talk about, it decomposes that functional area into activities and then provides example tasks for you. All right. And David, I think this is what you mean, because this is also available online in the website. So you're going to get it via PDF, but you also go into the INCOSE website and actually look at this online. So all of the areas are described in this way. Okay. And again, you're going to get this. All right. It also goes through the details, more detail than what we're covering this morning. So I'm going to pull that back here. And of course, the total number of months must meet or exceed 60. All right. Lastly, you'll need to sign the application, send in your money. Now this costs $350 to apply. And then you're not done.
You got your own bank?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me see if I can draw against it. So then the last part, besides the knowledge exam or academic equivalence, the last part is references. Unfortunately for those of us applying, the reference section is significant. And in fact, you will need to ask three people rather, I should say, to give you references. It helps if they're certified. All right. It's not required, but it does help. So you will provide three people. They will need to fill out this information. And so notice, because I'm going to take you through some of the questions here. The reference person will need to describe what is the relationship or connection with the applicant, i.e. you. All right. They're going to also need to provide current job title, etc. But my focus is down here. Describe the number of years and type of systems engineering experience. This is the references experience. So in essence, the referenced person is going to have to provide rough equivalent of a resume, at least in systems engineering. All right. And then anything else that can help. Now, this is all about the actual reference person. Then the reference person will fill out the final section, and that is the knowledge of the applicant. And notice here, the reference person is going to explain what you did, what was your experience, what was the work you performed, and what were the outcomes or products that you produced, how many months, etc. And in general, the applicant's experience. All right. Dan, I will not argue with that. This is significant. So it's more than what we may be used to in terms of asking people to be a reference. It's going to take some time from the reference person. So please, when you ask someone to be a reference for your certification, please explain to them what's involved. Not, I don't mean so that they can say no, hopefully that won't be the case, but they have the proper expectations of what it's going to take in order for them to provide a viable reference. So that's important. You'll need three. You need three references here. They have their own form, as I've been showing you. So they'll fill out the form. They will send it into INCOSE. And then last but not least, of course, is the exam, which I won't go over because we talked about it's the same exam as the ASEP. Dan, I don't know the answer to your second question. How many?
I'm just kidding. It's mostly a you and Paul thing. So I'm probably going to talk to Paul about how to get through this nightmare. Okay.
Very good. All right. So are there
We
any?
gotta have a video for people in healthcare who are not DoD to understand what you guys are even talking about.
All right. All right. Are there any questions on the CCEP application process?
Yeah, I do have one legit question. Is program management part of systems engineering? Is there a place that you put your, manage large projects? And similar question with, I'll call it business development, the justification of a financial business case. If it was DoD, it would define requirements. If it's the Walt Disney Company or a large major nonprofit, it would be, we're going to deliver this system that will deliver X, Y, Z millions of dollars. Is there a place to put those types of experience to count them as months?
Steve, I can talk a little to this. It's just there is an appendix A that goes through all the is it 14, Steve? There are 14 functional areas
Yes.
that you can apply to. So before you start your application, read those functional areas. And as you think about your experience, link it to a area, okay? And it could be multiple areas, right? You could say, oh, I do some design work, but I also did some CM work. So it all depends on how you describe your experience to make it fit. So, and you should probably describe it with the wording that you find in an Appendix A, right? So is that the new Appendix A, or is that?
It's from version 1.0, which is my understanding is the latest. So
Version 1.0 of what? Of the certification?
This is the CEP certification definition and requirements document.
And that's from 2018. So
2018.
Five years ago. Well, Appendix A also has all that
right
in there, which
Correct.
is what you download for your application. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, couldn't agree
show
more
that.
with the comments. And I appreciate FYR is mentioning about the references. Yes, each reference has to fill out their own form, and it's time consuming. I won't lie to you.
And they need to explain how they're a system engineer. One thing I usually encourage my students is don't have them talk about their program management. A lot of times you go to program managers and say, well, you've seen everything I've done. Make sure that the program manager has a system engineering background. A lot do. And tell them to focus on their system engineering background, not their program management. Because INCOSE does not care how effective a program manager this reference is. They care about the fact they're system engineers. Very important.
Yes, thank you for the clarification, Paul. Excellent. Are there any other questions before I move on to ECEP? Okay, so let's talk about ECEP. Notice here, of course, there is overlap, just as there was in the first two. So I won't go through the overlap portion, but ECEP is different. It is the highest level by far. You must be a member in order to apply. And there is a separate application form for ECEP. It is also involved, just like the CCEP, but it's different. So let me go over those for a little bit. So same as you've seen before, it asks you for information. You must be a member. It'll ask you if you're certified already. And again, you don't have to be to apply for ECEP. And then just as before, you will need to put in your academic resume, your academic background. Now here, just like in CCEP, the minimum is that you have a qualifying bachelor's degree, in essence, a degree in the STEM field. And that will equate to having a minimum of 20 years experience. In this case, though, if, and this is important to understand, if you are already a CCEP certified professional, then your requirements are a qualifying or STEM bachelor's degree and a minimum of 20 years experience. And so here's the important distinction. If you are not a CCEP, in other words, you're just applying for ECEP either with no certification or with an ACEP certification, and you have a qualifying degree, bachelor's degree, the experience level increases. All right, it goes up to 25 years. That's important. So please, if you are just applying to ECEP without having a CCEP degree, you are responsible for 5 additional years of experience. Then just like the other CCEP level, if you do not have a qualifying degree, an extra 5 years is put on. And if you have no bachelor's degree at all, an additional 5 years is put on to that. So you will need to select where you fall in here. Then the experience is going to be similar, if not exact, to what you would do for a CCEP application. You are going to put in for each position that you have had in systems engineering, your title, the supervisor, the organization, the number of months, and your role. And then for each position, same as before, you're going to pull down from the menu the functional area and describe what you've done in the functional area. This is going to be a lot longer because you don't have 5 years to provide. You must provide 20, 25, etc. years. So this is going to be quite a long process. Once you've done that, again, if you have an automated application form, it will add the number of months for you. If not, you will have to fill out the matrix for each position. Thankfully, 7 is not the required number or maximum number. You can have many more. All right. And you must have at least 240. That's assuming you're under a 20-year minimum. More number of months if you obviously if you fall into a different category. So you'll need to go through the same process as the CCEP, but now you need to account for a lot longer in terms of years of experience. And again, they count it by month. And then you sign your name, etc. All right, so that's the application. You have to pay. It does cost quite a bit of money, so it's $630. You will need the same reference requirement. So 3 references, same thing as we've showed before. The 3 references need to have experience. Here, of course, there will tend to be more experienced references. You may need more than 3. If you can't account for all 20 years plus of your experience, you may want to consider additional references so that at least a significant majority of your experience is covered by your references. I would recommend that you have enough or sufficient references to cover the minimum number of years of experience.
Well, to be fair, I went through this for the ECEP.
Yes.
They are cognizant that after 10 years, it's hard to get references sometimes. So it's okay. I think if you get at least within 10 years of what you accomplished, they're fine with that. It doesn't have to be all 20 years, you know. I think they just want to. And by the way, they are looking heavily into that leadership area aspect. of the ESEP.
Thank you for both of those, Paul. I appreciate that. That's a good clarification. And speaking of the leadership, let me go through.
Oh,
Here
the
we
other
go.
thing I forgot.
Oh,
They
yeah.
will call your references for this. There will
Yes.
be that your references will be called. In the other one, maybe, maybe not. They're just going to read it. This one, they will call at least 2 of your references. So it's very important that they understand they're going to be called. They're going to have almost an interview themselves, you know, besides yours, which you're about to get into. Yeah.
Perfect segue, Paul. Perfect segue. Thank you. So, and I couldn't have said it better myself. So you will need an interview. Now, the interview can be virtual or via phone. Typically, it's a phone or something like a Zoom interview. However, they set it up. For you, the applicant, it will be about a 1-hour interview. And then just as Paul said, I'll say typically, everybody I've talked to who is an ESEP has had at least 2 of their references called. And it's more than just a phone call that says, okay, I just want to, verify. It's actually can be thought of as an interview itself, where they are interviewing 2 of your references. And of course, the focus of that interview is both their experience as well as their relationship with you. So again, when you select your 3 or more references for the ESEP, please be cognizant of the fact and let them know that there's a good chance they will be called and then have to go through a 30-minute interview. And then I also appreciated the fact that Paul brought up the leadership portion. So even though, except for the interview, the rest of the process is very similar to CCEP. However, they are really looking and they put an emphasis on the leadership aspect of this type of professionalism. So I would recommend that you in your application emphasize leadership positions or responsibilities that you have had. And again, in the reference portion, that the references emphasize the leadership portion, or at least can address it in their interview.
Yeah,
Because
that's true. The application actually has a leadership portion that you need to fill out. So that's
excellent.
Would actually, and the leadership would be like, I was a chief engineer. I taught, and things like that. I have a master's. Actually, that's where if you have extended education, it gives you a little bit of, they give you a certain amount of years for each leadership thingy. So yeah, you can read it once you go through it. Yeah.
Excellent.
Right.
Good. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. All right. Are there any questions or clarifications for ESEP? I realize ESEP is not going to be for everyone. It is involved significantly, and quite honestly, you need to have the credentials as well. So any questions? All right. I realize we've been going for, well, just under an hour and a half. I'm going to continue again, just because we started a little late, but obviously this being virtual, those who need a break, please feel free, of course. And I know you have already if you needed a break. So just wanted to understand, or wanted everybody to understand that. All right. Then, so that's the process. I want to now talk about how to stay certified, because this also is a process and it's important to understand that. So let me do this. I'm going to bring up part 2 and let me share my screen. Here we go. So part 2 is going to talk about how do you keep your certification. And what is the renewal process? Now, this only applies to ACEP and CCEP. If once you have been approved for ECEP, there is no renewal required. There's no process for renewal required, with the exception that you must remain a member of INCOSE. That's true regardless of the level. So let me talk about how do we remain. You don't have to go through the application process every 3 or 5 years. That's the good news. So first of all, let me talk a little bit about the differences. If you are an ACEP, your ACEP certification is good for 5 years. At the end or nearing the end of 5 years, if you desire to stay at an ACEP level, you will need to apply for renewal. It is $100 to apply to be renewed for an additional 5 years. Always, you must remain a member of INCOSE. And now, in order to remain certified, I want to introduce this concept of a PDU. You may have heard about these. These are professional development units, PDUs. What you need to do, and again, this is irregardless of ACEP or CCEP, what you will need to do is keep track of professional development units earned. For CCEP, your CCEP certification is only good for 3 years. Near or at the end of the 3 years, you will need to apply for renewal. Again, $100 fee. The number of PDUs is the same, except that the period is less, 3 years versus 5. All right. And again, ECEP, there is no renewal process required. So let me talk about PDUs, because that really is the heart of staying certified in INCOSE. There are a series or a set of categories and a set of definitions of the activities whereby you earn PDUs. All of these can be found in the document I'm going to give you, the certification program definition and requirements document. It's also online, so you can go into INCOSE and look at all of these. So there are a number of categories, as I mentioned. Let me go through the categories. The first is technical society. Now that obviously can be INCOSE. It also can be other technical societies as well. Examples are IEEE. All right, and so there are a number of different types of societies, but I'm going to just focus on INCOSE. So simply remaining a member for the time period will gain you or earn you 5 PDUs a year to a maximum of 15. Even if you're an ACEP, the maximum number of PDUs in that particular task is 15. So you only get 15. All right, so you get some, at least to start, you know, more than 10% simply by remaining a member, which you have to do anyway. Then you can see down this list, if you attend or participate in INCOSE activities, you will also earn PDUs. So simply attending, for example, if you attend the Chesapeake chapter events, we have 10 monthly meetings. We do not have a meeting in July or December, but we have a meeting in the other 10 months. You will get 1 PDU per hour of attendance. So 10, if you attend all 10, the meeting is a 1-hour meeting, you would get 10 PDUs per year, up to a maximum of 30 in your time frame, your renewal period. Easily done. Easily done. If you attend one of the INCOSE's conferences or the International Symposium or the International Working Session, you will also get credit for attendance, simply attending. If you participate in one of the many working groups, and INCOSE has more than 30, probably more than 40, I believe, you will get credit. Keep in mind that if you are working in a working group, there's no limit to the number of PDUs. If you have a leadership role in INCOSE, for example, again, you will get 1 PDU per hour. If you volunteer in schools for STEM, this would be at the high school, the middle school, or the elementary school level, you get 1 PDU per hour. Any volunteers in other types of community services. And then lastly, if you actually earn the certification in some other systems engineering field, we've talked about that. We've used some examples here this morning. You also get 5 PDUs for that certification. Not much, but it's there. That's just in one category. So keep in mind, if you are heavily involved, if you're significantly involved in INCOSE, you will be able to get all of your PDUs simply by being an active member of INCOSE, working in working groups, attending seminars, or attending the conferences and symposium. Now, that's not the only category. The second is coursework and publication. If you are going for a degree, you can apply those degree, the requirements, the courses you take, etc., for your renewal. So if you are taking a course, you get 2 PDUs. If it's a graduate course for credit, you get 2 PDUs per class hour. And think of that, a typical semester course may be 35 to 40 hours. Again, that will give you over half of the PDUs you need in the renewal period. There's no limit. If you're a teacher, same thing. You can provide, or you can earn PDUs. If you publish an article, you will also gain 5 PDUs. If you publish a book, you'll gain 30 PDUs as well. And then there's also a special category of attending a vendor presentation. So if you are involved in the academic world, this is a very rich source of PDUs. The third and final category is related to your job. If you receive a patent, if you serve as a lead systems engineer, if you're leading an organization and involved in increasing membership or certification rather in your organization, you get credit for that. And then lastly, volunteer activities. All right. So a lot of different ways to earn PDUs. Now, a very common question here is, okay, well, how do I inform INCOSE about all of these PDUs that I've earned? There is a form, Form 13, of which you will get a copy of. There is a form, Form 13, where you will provide an accounting. You'll provide the activity type if you look on the left-hand side. You will provide the date of the activity, a description, whether you participated virtually or not, the location, and the number of PDU credits you are claiming. And this list can be as long as you need. So you can add rows to this form, and you then simply keep track. All right. Once you've done that and it's up, it's time for your renewal, you will need to submit the PDU activity spreadsheet. Now, remember, you must use Form 13. Not that hard. In fact, Form 13 is provided from INCOSE in Excel format. So it's an actual Excel spreadsheet. Again, I'm going to send you a copy along with the materials here. INCOSE does have the right to ask you to provide verification. So I do recommend that you keep that in the back of your head as you are claiming these PDUs. So that you will submit your spreadsheet. You do not need to submit any verification unless it's asked for. All right. Also wanted to mention that INCOSE will audit your version. So if you are claiming PDUs in which you're ineligible for, they just don't meet the requirement, then INCOSE can change the number of PDUs. Now, where do you, excuse me, where would you find a description of these activities? Again, the document I'm going to send you has a description of all of these. It gets into more detail. So you'll have that. It's also available online. The last point I want to mention is that you may claim more than 120 PDUs. If you have between 121 and 150, up to 30 of those extra PDUs can be carried over to your next renewal period. So I want you to be aware of that you can get a head start on your next renewal period. So that's important to keep track as well. So please don't throw everything out. You can carry PDU units from renewal period to renewal period. So once you've done that, once you've filled out Form 13, you have submitted your renewal fee, you have submitted your activity spreadsheet, that's Form 13. INCOSE has gone through all that process. You will need to pay the fee. And again, it's $100 to renew, at least as of this year. If you miss your expiration date, all right, which I did, by the way, there is a grace period. So depending on the level of certification, if you submit an application for renewal after your expiration date, but it's within 6 months of your expiration date, INCOSE will require an additional $50, so $150 total, and you will need to provide an additional 12 PDUs for ACEP, 20 PDUs for CCEP. So if you're a CCEP, you missed the deadline, you apply late, instead of 120 PDUs, you are now required to have 140 PDUs. And instead of $100, you will need to pay $150. And then if you fall within 6 to 12 months, it all goes up. Basically, it's doubled. If you're beyond 12 months, then what you'll need to do is pay a little more, but the number of credits or PDUs will also go up. So understand this. If it's 12 months and a week, it's beyond 12 months, you will need, if you're an ACEP and you're applying to renew, you will need $150 plus $100, so $250 total, and 48 additional PDUs. In other words, 168, because now beyond 12 months, they go by year. So keep that in mind, please. Many times it might be simply worth going through the certification process. Again, that's up to you. All right.
Hey, Steve, one more
Yes.
suggestion.
Mhm.
It is hard to keep track of your PDUs. I suggest you take that spreadsheet, make a Google spreadsheet, a Google Doc that you can access rather easily, and just keep track. When you do a PDU, put it in there right away. You do not want to wait 3 years like I did and start going through your emails. Oh yeah, what did I do? Did I do that? And stuff. It is absolutely horrible to go back through 3 years of emails and other things. So just keep track of it as you go along. Don't just let this sit, because it really takes a lot of effort to figure out all your PDUs if you don't track them.
I think that's very sound advice. Very sound advice. Thank you. All right. So that's the renewal process. Are there any questions on the renewal? Okay, cool. All right. So we're coming near the end, and I just have 2 additional things that I want to talk about. So part 3 is getting to the exam. All right. So let me talk a little bit about the exam and what to expect. Understand that the exam is based completely on the Systems Engineering Handbook. Unfortunately, the exam covers it all. So you will need to be aware of all 10 sections. Now, yeah, the handbook scope is probably not something that you're going to have to memorize. And really, you don't have to memorize anything, although you might need to do some of that. But bottom line is, all 10 sections are fair game on the exam. I mentioned that the handbook is based on ISO 15288. And specifically, sections 4 through 8 follow the standard. I mean, there's no deviation. They follow the standard. So in sections 4 through 8, you are going to be introduced to 31 processes. And these processes fall into 5 categories. Each of these categories are a separate section or chapter of the INCOSE handbook. So this means you're going to have to learn a lot. There's a great deal of breadth here. And again, every process will be covered, or at least is eligible to be covered. David, the version 5. So what I know is that once version 5 has been published, released, which is scheduled for next month, there will be a period, an overlap period, where you can be tested in the knowledge exam on the 4th edition. That period of time will be at least through the end of the year, this year. It may extend into 2024. Don't know yet about the date, but it's at least going to be through the end of December and likely into 2024. You can select version 5 or the 5th edition to be tested once INCOSE has published the test. I don't have a date yet for when the test will be available. So unfortunately, we'll just have to see. So that's the plan for the transition. Sometime in 2024, INCOSE will establish a date that says from this point on, we will only be testing the 5th edition. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, just to maybe for the benefit of the people that are preparing for the exam or intend to take the exam either before the end of the year, at the beginning of next year, which is usually the case, at least for the people that contact me here in Italy. It's very true what you've just said. This is a transition year, meaning 2023, because of the fact that we now have version 5 of the handbook. There's going to be a sort of like a phase in and phase out of version 4, because we're moving now into version 5. So 2023 is seen as a transition period, and it's also needed because of the equivalency that you mentioned previously. So all the institutions, universities that have to realign their programs to match also the needs and the requirements for edition 5 of the handbook. So this is why it's a transition year. In theory, as soon as the version 5 is published, which basically means now, it was published last week, essentially, there's a grace period of, let's say, 6 months, which means that from now until the end of the year, there will be some form of experimentation with contents from edition 5 of the handbook. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to learn everything in both editions of the handbook. It just simply states that this is a transition year, and obviously the INCOSE Certification Office needs to test the contents also of the edition 5 of the handbook. So this is why there's this phase in and phase out of the handbooks. What I can say is that Courtney and the people from the certification office have actually already done some form of beta testing about 2 months ago. So the move towards version 5 it has already started. But certainly, as you've just said, from 2024, we will switch to edition 5 of the handbook. So that's something to bear in mind. The other thing as well, because I was the reviewer, one of the reviewers for the new handbook, and I also have the ebook now of version 5, I can tell you something else as well about the contents. We're moving from version 4, which is essentially based on 10 chapters, as you've just mentioned in one of your slides, to 6 parts. So it's the new handbook is structured in a different way. All I'll mention is that it follows more or less a format similar to CEP, which is also based on parts. So the new handbook is not based on chapters like version 4. It's based on a 6-part series of knowledge areas, as you would call them in the CEP document. So that's just to add to what you've just presented, and but the core is what you've actually just put on the what you have projected right now. It's obviously tied to everything that is connected to the 15288, which means obviously all the processes, technical management, organization, project enabling processes, and obviously agreement processes. So the core is still there. That hasn't changed.
Great.
One more thing, the INCOSE, the standard itself is being updated, right, Dave?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. The 15288 was published actually at the end of May. So roughly about 6 to 7 weeks ago, it was published by ISO and IEC and also IEEE. So
and they kept the processes pretty much.
Yeah, they haven't changed. Some of the graphical impact has changed in the handbook. That I can declare, because that's true. But at the end of the day, it's still systems engineering that you have to have in your head. So the knowledge exam is based on the contents of the handbook, which mimics, as you've just said, the 15288. And possibly also other things, other types of standard, like the 29148 for requirements management, and so forth. So it's a big change. Oh yeah, and one other thing, is there more detail in edition 5? Well, I'll give you a number. We're going from roughly 304 pages in edition 4 to 368, more or less, in edition 5. So that's more or less 20% more. That doesn't mean to say that you have to learn 20% more. It just simply means that there's more content.
No, that makes sense. I've been talking to Courtney as well as being a trainer, and you are right, Steve. They need to not only make sure that the training aspects are being updated, but also the courses that are done at the colleges. So they
Yes,
need to be updated. So
Yeah.
because of that, they need to kind of arrange that. So the end of the year is kind of I believe, a spot they're trying to hit, but that doesn't mean they won't extend it if they find like the universities need more time or something.
Yeah. Obviously, from an industrial perspective, companies want to certify their engineers before the end of this year because they have to satisfy a certain budget. So in my particular case, I've already switched to version 5, but I won't be doing any specific training until September. So this means that once the next bunch of trainees for the CEP certification course finish the training with me, it means that they'll probably have something in between 2 to 3 months to prepare for the CEP examination. So again, we're getting towards the end of the year, so it's it's somewhere. Let's say I'm being provident in the sense that I'm gearing up people to think about next year rather than this year. Oh yeah, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention as well, because of this thing, the fact that it's a transition year. Remember also that even though the exams are usually based on 100 exam questions, which means roughly about a minute for each question, and that gives you an indication of the duration of the exam. There are also other 2 versions of the same exam. One is 120 questions, which again has that same multiplication factor of 1 minute per exam question. But there's also potentially a version which is the 150 question version, which is more an experimentation where INCOSE adds either 30 questions or 50 questions to the 100 question version. And the reason why they have this last, or you could see or witness this last version of exam paper, is because they're trying out new exam questions. That's the reason why they do it this way as well. But the vast majority of exam papers are based on 100 questions, then 120, and occasionally they also do 150 questions.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. And also thanks for the insight, David. I do appreciate that. That was really good in discussing version 5. So always good to have somebody that was part of the process for version 5.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, if anybody wants to, I actually have some slides where you can see the differences. Apart from the fact that Courtney had said they've actually done something similar. But now that the edition 5 is actually out, you can compare 1-to-1 as well. And that's very easily, by the way, because you just need to look at the table of contents in edition 4 and compare it to edition 5, and you can see the discrepancies. You can see the changes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. That would be perfect. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that, David. For those of you, if you're not familiar with the handbook and dealing with the processes in particular, each process is described individually in the handbook. Also, I wanted you to become familiar with the IPO diagram. IPO stands for input, process, output. In the handbook, these are all given in an individual diagram where the inputs to the process are given, the actual activities within the process are provided, and the outputs. And these are all described in some level of detail within the handbook. So again, I want you to be aware if you're planning on taking the exam, it's a lot of material. There are 31 processes, and all of this is eligible for questions on the exam. So that's very important to understand. Now, in version 4, there are 2 additional sections. One is the cross-cutting systems engineering activities, and I've listed the major subsections rather, of section or chapter 9. And then there's also specialty engineering, and I've listed the subsections here for that chapter as well. So it's critical that you are familiar with all of these. Again, they're all eligible for the exam. Now, with that said, so we've talked a little bit about, hey, how, are there any other ways except simply individual studying? Are there any other ways that we can do this that can help you? And the answer is yes. So we've already talked about the academic courses. Within the Chesapeake chapter, there are 2 universities that have academic equivalency. And you saw the list. By the way, you can go online in the INCOSE website. They keep the list up to date, currently 14. But we also have training courses. Now, I'm very privileged to have one of those training course persons here involved today, and that is an organization called SE Scholar. Before I let Paul mention some things about SE Scholar, I did want you to know there are many types of training courses, and they run the gamut, meaning you can get a short course, you can get a very significant course. Some of these courses can last up to a full week, basically a full-time equivalency. So there's a lot available. Paul, can I invite you just to mention briefly what would these courses entail?
Sure. No, absolutely. Actually, what I want to do, I'm going to put a few things, and I apologize. I started the chapter in order to get this Zoom to start. So sorry that it says INCOSE chapter. If you notice, I did sign up as SE Scholar as well. So let me put this in the message. And what I want to give you guys the ability to do, did you get that? You did not. Oh, I'm at the wrong place. Control paste. Oh, nope, that's not it at all. All right, I just realized I'm on 2 different computers. So give me a second. If you look behind me, you'll see that I have a paste. There we go. All right, and I don't know if you want to go ahead and click on that link since you are controlling the thing. What's nice is INCOSE has, they're going to start using this thing called a professional development portal. And part of that will be the ability to see the training providers. So right now, they kind of show it, the training providers, I believe if you go on, and I got to find that, but it's a Excel spreadsheet, right? And so in the Excel spreadsheet, I'm in there, like you said, there's a bunch more. I understand you think there's probably a lot of us out here that do this, but it's not, because we're a niche little thing that we do. But one nice thing about it is teaching the handbook does kind of give you a good understanding of system engineering in general. So it's actually pretty helpful in that respect. So I actually have used the information I used for my course. I use it at UMBC, and that's why we were able to get a equivalency because of that. So what you show here is actually showing how it does it. There is a link, if you notice in there, for not renewing. If you move up a little bit, you'll see there it says learning objectives. So that's kind of a cool thing that you can use. And of course, as a trainer, I'm trying to teach those learning objectives, which is, like you said, the entire handbook. So what I did was I developed, if you look behind me, you can see that that's a 1-page diagram that shows all 31 processes interacting with each other. This is very proprietary to mine. It's the way I teach the course. If you're graphically oriented, you'll find that that's fairly helpful as you're doing it. The other thing I wanted to explain to you is I do have 2 aspects, and I'll put that in the handbook as well, is a link to my own course. I don't want to take up a lot of time. I do explain that. I don't know if you want to click on that link as well to show it, but this is the exam, and if you scroll down, you'll see it's a lecture base. All the lectures are online. You take it as you feel is necessary. I have the diagram I teach from. If you keep going down, I do have a course, a web portal that you would go in, and all my videos are there. And I do have some quizzes, and I allow you also. And keep in mind, the quizzes are all based on the handbook, but they're from my fevered brain. They're not actually the quizzes that you would be taking. Now, I have a lot of testimonies of people who've taken my class and have done well. Last but not least, I'm going to give you one more link that you may find interesting. Let me see if I can get it down here. Let me do this, paste. And that link goes to an Amazon page. It's a study notebook. It's kind of cool. It's a thing that when you open it up, they're blank pages and all, but it's like, can you remember that IPO and everything that's in it? So it's a good way. It's actually fairly good study notebook to use if you're taking my class. Oh, and by the way, if you noticed one of my links to you to the prep, if you use those 2 codes, I'll give you $50 off for showing up here. I'd appreciate you being here. And thank you, Steve, for giving me a few minutes here to talk about my training. I appreciate that. And
You're
if
welcome.
you have any questions, please let me know. It'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I wanted to give everyone just an idea of the programs that are available. Obviously, Paul is a member of Chesapeake chapter, so I thought it would be a good idea. He is local, and so that'll give you a good flavor.
Oh
for
yeah,
those.
and keep in mind my videos. It's like 20 hours of videos, so it does take a while to get through, no matter what. And like you said, if you do it, I do teach a 1-week course to get people through this as well. So yeah, hopefully it'll help you, but it's not an easy thing and well worth it. If you feel you this is a little overwhelming with the 31 processes and stuff like this, a trainer like me or others would try to give you context in terms of what you're talking about. It just gives you a better sense of what all these processes are and what they kind of do. All right.
Great. Thank you, Paul. I
Oh, no
appreciate
problem.
that.
No problem.
As we are finishing up, I really am trying to be finished up at 1/4 after the hour. Are there any questions on the exam, the concept of obviously prep courses, which I do recommend if you have the time to devote, but you're going to have to devote a lot of time regardless, whether you do it individually or through some formal type. The last aspect that I wanted to talk about in the last 3 minutes that we have remaining is the fact that in INCOSE, in the website, INCOSE has a digital model. It is currently based on version 4. It has just been uploaded recently. It was available about 2 months ago or so. And it is something that you can use as a study guide or help you would need to be logged in as a INCOSE member, so you can't get to it unless you are logged in. Here is the link on the left-hand side, and that brings you up to the home page. It's called the Digital Systems Engineering Process Model. If you click on the Try button, what that'll do is it will take you to the process model web page. You'll first see, of course, a description on the right. To get to the actual model itself, you're going to be looking in the upper left-hand corner, and specifically, if you pull down the menu of views, you'll see the System Lifecycle Processes 01. That is the digital model. If you click on that link, then up will come the actual digital model. And so what I wanted to do, actually, there's not going to be a lot of time. So rather than give a demo, which will take us well beyond quarter after, what I will say is that this is an interactive tool. You can click on any one of the 31 processes. Up will come a description of the process. Up will come the IPO diagram, where you then can click on any of the inputs, any of the activities, and any of the outputs, and it will describe those inputs and outputs for you. And then you can always navigate back to the home page of the model, which is what I'm showing on the screen. So it's not an automated simulation in any sense. What it does allow you to do is navigate easily through the different processes. So it is a tool available to all INCOSE members, and I wanted you to be aware of that. All right. With that, that concludes the webinar for today. Are there any other questions before we adjourn? Thank you, David, by the way, and thank you for your input. That was most insightful. I do appreciate that, and I appreciate you attending this morning.
Yeah, it's at 6, well, 6:15 in the afternoon.
Okay.
Actually, I was a bit confused because I sent a message about 15 minutes beforehand before I connected, because I don't know why, but I had 2 different dates. One was the 24th and one was the 25th of June. And I just couldn't understand why my calendar was saying it was this afternoon. But I was convinced that it was this afternoon. So I was going to stay anyway until something happened. And luckily I was right. It was this afternoon. So yeah, by the way, that model at the end, very, very, very good. Super useful. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that.
I'm glad. I am sorry we ran out of time. I would have loved to have shown it, actual demo of it. I've used this model fairly extensively over the last 2 months, so very good.
Yeah, good. I'll try it out certainly. Okay.
Well, thank you all for attending. I really do appreciate it. I will send out all these materials to those that registered for the event. If you need, or if someone else would like it, like the materials, please just send me an email. It is not restricted. These materials are available to any and all INCOSE members. So thank you very much.